Greetings, greetings, greetings. My name is Ram Hotep L. I'll be your master of ceremony, broadcasting on behalf of the number 13 SignsAstrology.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. On this episode, I want to speak about my views pertaining to Jesus, and I want to talk about some of the metaphysics or some of the hidden meanings behind Jesus, and I want to do this very briefly. So this is just kind of like getting you started and going towards the right direction in your research when it comes to looking into the topic of Jesus. It's a good time to do this, being as though Easter was yesterday. We're in a very good time. We're in a new cycle, a new sun. We're in the Aries sun now. The sun has left Pisces and has transitioned to Aries on April the 19th. So we're in a totally new energy. The spring energy is in full effect. So it's a good time to speak on this topic. You know me, I'm all about timing. Astrology is all about timing. So when you look at this Jesus story, I look at it in two ways, just to be straight up front with you and be brief, but give you a good meaning behind it. Now, Jesus is definitely an entity. And Jesus, when you understand who he really is and what his true function is, Jesus is actually over all of the different occult entities. And what makes Jesus interesting is because of the fact that Jesus is over the dark entities as well as the light entities. Jesus sits over as the head over all of those entities. And this is something that had to come about because of the fact that before the advent of Jesus, you had this duality thing going on here in when it comes to human nature. And most people that came to this planet, the only way to really get them to be right and to do right was to use laws or the fear of the law as a means and a way to make people do right. So the way that, I guess you could say, on a world stage level, because this is what God really means. God is, he says that my kingdom is in heaven as well as on earth. So on a world stage level, that's God's kingdom. And God can be an evil power or a good power, because God just means force and power. So Jesus had to come because before that you had a system of godhood set up, but a lot of it was based on the law and a lot of it was based on fear, and it was a very dark type of energy to rule the planet with. Very primitive when you're talking about the Torah, because this is what we're speaking on now. Like the law, like when you understand religion, what you have to understand is that you're studying law. People, they get on here and they watch my channel and they say, man, this dude sound religious. Like he just on here using astrology, trying to start his own religion. And astrology is not a religion, but I guess you could say it is, because astrology represents the law. And religion goes into understanding the law. So you could say that I'm non-religious, but at the same time, do you understand the religious meaning of the law? See, lawyers, they understand, and judges really is what it really is. Judges and Shriners and people in high up orders and master masons that belong to the judges' chambers, they understand that the Quran and the Bible, these are law books. The Torah, and then the Injil, which is the New Testament, these are law books and the ways of administering law. And this is the book or the order. The Bible represents the highest law book of the day. This is why the judges have to have a Bible there. And this is why a lot of judges secretly have a Quran as well, because the Quran is a part of that, because all of this comes out of the Catholic Church and it goes back to Babylon. So like religion and all of that goes back to Babylon, and it goes back to the codes of Hammurabi. And this is where all these laws come from. So when you understand, you have to think about that before you just say, I'm not religious at all, I ain't studying none of that, it's just all about get my spirit right, get my life right. But then you out here every day partaking in business, no matter how you look at it, and you're out here every day dealing in law. And this is why you get confused, and you may be in a different country, you don't understand their law because you don't understand their religion. You see, like if you're in Sudan, you have to understand the Quran. You have to understand the laws of the Quran and how things are governed to be able to demonstrate in that type of environment. Just like if you're in America, you have to understand the law of contracts, because America's set up based upon, predicated upon the law of contracts. So getting back to my point with Jesus, you have to, when you start understanding and researching Jesus, there's a spiritual aspect to it that does deal with the self and the relationship and connection you have with a higher power and a source. But then there's also a legal aspect to Jesus, and that's how I look at it personally. So briefly, I'll go into how I look at the legal aspect. Is that he represents, Jesus for one thing was Jesus, and then there's Jesus Christ. See, Jesus had to die. Jesus died. They say he died at the age of 33. Jesus didn't die at the age of 33. Jesus became the Christ. And I feel like the need to say this before I go on. I know some of you watch my other videos where I'm talking about Jesus, and you might not have heard me speak on this level. This is kind of taking you to a deeper level on how I view Jesus. I do understand that I spoke to you about there's three Jesus figures in the Bible, but that's a different subject that I won't cover here, because that's going into a different doctrine when you understand that level. But that's very true, so it doesn't take away from that point. But Jesus had to die at the age of 33, and then he came back as the Christ, or the Christ, or the anointed one. See, it's the saying that goes is that if you want to do what you never done and go where you never go, you never go where you have never went, then you have to be who you never were. And Jesus had to die. He had to shed himself of the physical body, in a sense, and transition himself into a higher being. But it's not that his physical body died. It's that he went through a spiritual process called the anointing, to whereas he activated his third eye, and his kundalini rose, his kundalini shot out of his head, and he basically got that halo, and he became the head, or the anointed one, or the king, or whatever you want to call it. So in that, Jesus represents your redeemer, because of the fact that, see, in the Torah, when you research the Torah, what was going on in the Torah is slavery. The Torah is talking about slavery. Mostly all of the Old Testament. A lot of people don't want to hear this, but it's true. It's true. The Torah is going into slavery, and Jesus represents the Redeemer, because he came to free you through love, but through understanding the law. When you study his life, it'll teach you what you must do. See, what Jesus did, all men must do. This is what, in the metaphysical circles, what is taught about the Christ. You have to follow in his footsteps. So he changed his name. He gave up his old life. Remember, they say he was born a Jew, meaning that he was born up under a certain system, which was really a form of slavery. When you understand the book of Numbers and all of that stuff in the Old Testament, I'll have to do a whole video on that to really break down to you how the Old Testament is definitely dealing with the codes of slavery, because of the fact that slavery was one of the biggest gross national products on this planet prior to like oil and stuff like that. Now we're dealing with oil and gold and uranium and all that stuff, but back then slavery was the GNP. So this is why the Torah goes into slavery. And Jesus, he came with his doctrine, freed you, and the slavery was based upon the law, or you're going to die. You're either going to do this or you're dead. That's slavery. Because slavery, there is no choice. There's no free will. You're either going to follow this law that was created and written by man, but so what? Or by a higher being, or alien, or whatever, still a being that is not perfect, that is not, definitely not the Most High, but you're going to definitely fall up under this law or die. That's slavery. Whereas when Jesus came, he came to redeem you. So they say Jesus died for your sins. What does that mean? Jesus died for your sins means that he became a new being. He redeemed himself. He died because of the fact that when he was born into this planet, he was born up under a certain name, and he knew he was born in slavery, just like you were born, as a lot of people were born as, in America, was born as 14th Amendment citizens, and even all over the world. A lot of people, you guys were born up under citizenship, which goes into slavery. A lot of people, they hate the truth, but it is what it is. You research it legally, that's what it means. So a lot of people were born up under that. And Jesus, his story represents how to free yourself from that. So that's what it's really all about. You have to redeem yourself by a lot of times it is switching your name. And I'm going to do a video on that, talking about the power in changing your name. So Jesus, he had to become the Kadesh, or the anointed one. Meaning the anointed one means that his third eye became open. And that's going into the spiritual aspect of Jesus, representing the Kundalini rising and the spiritual meaning of Easter, really. because they say Jesus rose from the dead, meaning that the Kundalini energy rose from the dead part, or the root chakra part, which is below the spine back here. The Kundalini energy rose from that lowly dead state to a higher pristine state, into an illuminated state, and shot out of your crown chakra. You became illuminated, and you became psychic, and you just knew all the right decisions to make, and you knew how to guide people. You became a leader instead of a follower, and you became a free man versus a slave. So that's what it goes into. See, Jesus, he said that he came with keys to get you out of hell. And you have to understand what he was doing. See, Jesus, you don't read about him really going home. If you notice, Jesus was kind of almost what you would imagine as an immigrant or a nomad. This is going into the fact that Jesus was a national or sovereign. You couldn't limit him to a jurisdiction. See, when they talk about people wanting to crucify him and him being locked up and things of that nature, that was going into the Pharisees and the Sadducees. That was the agents during that time that wanted to stop Jesus from being a free man and wanted to contain Jesus and wanted to limit Jesus. So the whole story about Jesus represents a man that had the knowledge to free himself from the law, and not only that, but had the knowledge to set up a government and a council with these apostles to teach people how to run the world without using slavery. That's what really the true teaching of Jesus is about. It's teaching you a system of, see, the whole world is ran off of MK Ultra control, slavery. And Jesus came to teach people how to run the world through intellect, through reason, through love, through these higher principles. So that's what my views on Jesus are. He taught you the rules of the living soul versus the straw man. The straw man is contained in a box and is told not to look outside of the box, and is told to live in fear. So most people, your spirit, you live within the confines of your straw man, your spirit. So what does that mean? That means that when you're at work, your soul, your energy is totally present at work. You live within the confines of your straw man, which means that your whole life is based upon keeping your straw man alive. You live within a box, whereas Jesus taught you how to live based upon the higher self and the rules of the soul, meaning that you're in the world, but you're not of it. So yeah, you may have a job or something like that, but you living on a higher level. You living on a spiritual octave. Because Jesus is teaching you about the rules of the soul, and you're learning how to, your soul can either exist within the body and within the shell and be captured and imprisoned there, or your soul can live outside of the body and the shell. So this is when you see people that can bring light orbs and energies around them. This is them bringing a portion of their essence outside their body. This is a portion of your soul. So when this talks about Jesus being able to walk on water and all these miracles, you notice he was like just this miracle man. In comparison to the other prophets, you notice he was more mystical. See, this is why we revere Jesus, because Moses was a lawman, more so. Aaron was a priest. He was a great speaker. These type of prophets. But then when you get into Jesus, Jesus represented this mystic that spoke. Even when he spoke, you didn't understand everything he was saying, because he was speaking to you on like 7 levels. Speaking to all 7 parts of yourself. So the story of Yeshua, man, the story of the Christ, or that whole estate, because that's what Jesus really represents, an estate. The estate of the Christ is deep. There was more than one Christ. Why do you think it's a Christ in every culture? Why do you think it's a word for Christ in almost all cultures, even the ancient Kemet? Going all the way back to ancient Egypt, even over in India with Krishna. There's a Christ figure all over, because this is an estate. And Jesus had 18 missing years in his sojourn that they don't tell you about in the Bible, because you got to remember the Bible was based upon the Council of Nicaea. And in the Council of Nicaea, they decided at that time to use certain parts and certain texts to make that the doctrine. This is when you understand doctrine. They brought together certain texts from the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha is the hidden text, or the text that didn't make the Bible. So they had to come and go into all these different books. The Hebrew Bible, there's Bibles before the original King James Bible, which goes into an estate That was a Bible for a certain family, the King James family. That goes into a whole nother thing. But when that Bible was compiled, you got to remember that there was other versions of other books. You got the Enuma Elish, the Gilgamesh epics, the Vedas, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You have all these different texts that you'll find remnants of the Bible and pieces of the Bible in all of these different texts. So when they came together to make that, that was based upon a council, a legal council. And they decided what they was going to put in that Bible. So there's a lot of missing years in Jesus' life. This is why we have to have eventually, and the world is going to have a new council of Nicaea. We need to research that. And those people that are on the world stage, us particular actors that are on the world stage, are going to have to sit down and have some form of a think tank. Because we need a new council of Nicaea to come down, because there's a lot of information that wasn't included in those books, and a lot of it goes into extraterrestrial information. So you talk about full disclosure, the reason why it's not happening yet, because we haven't put together a world think tank yet that deals with, okay, we know Christianity is the dominant religion, that's cool, but let's go ahead and try to update the doctrine and talk about some of the stuff that wasn't included in there. Like, what about the book of Enoch? And a lot of that information in the real original book of Enoch was not included in the Bible. So you hear a little bit about Enoch in the Bible, but you really don't get the full story. So Jesus had 18 missing years. Jesus went to India. Jesus was over here with the Native Americans, dancing with us. Over in South America. Jesus was over in Europe, moving around, traveling, man, going to all these different mystery schools before he did his thing that year. Because really, Jesus, the story of the Bible about Jesus was only a year. That's only 1 year of his life. And what happened in 1 year. It doesn't tell you about what happened 18 years before that or 32 years before that. It doesn't tell you what happens, because he lived to be 120 years old. It doesn't tell you what happened 100 years after that. It's just isolated incident of 1 year showing how mystical he was, and they only give you a little bit. So my views on Jesus is that he's not taught. Jesus left his parents at a young age. He was a soldier. Jesus was so deep into the spirituality thing that he was traveling the world as a 12 years old, 12, 13 years old, traveling the world. Because you were considered grown back then, because he grew up in the tribe of Yehuda, or the tribe of Judah, which is where they get Yoda from in Star Wars. So in that tribe, you were grown at 13. So he was moving around at a young age, and there's parts of it in the Bible where his mom was trying to tell him to settle down, and he was like, I'm about my father's work. And he wasn't talking about his physical father, he was talking about his spiritual father, because he was in tune with his higher self and his crown chakra. So there's a lot about Jesus' life that's metaphysical and occult and mystical that people don't. Jesus was married. He had a secret marriage. He was a part of a brotherhood where they couldn't. And shout out to Imam Isa for teaching me this, because I learned all this from Imam Isa. A lot of this hidden in history, and as well as when I was in the Moorish Science Temple, and in the Aquarian Gospel of Levi as well. So I've researched a lot of the hidden meanings of Jesus, so I can go on and on, but I'll just say this, and I'll go ahead and shut down. He had a secret marriage. He was a part of a secret brotherhood, and they couldn't get married. So when the brothers they couldn't get married in that particular name. That's what it really was about. See, he was in a brotherhood. They couldn't marry up under or make a contract up under this name, because they couldn't contract with people. This was a secret, so exclusive and secret of a brotherhood, they couldn't make any contracts. So he had to get married up under this name, right? He couldn't get married up under this name because they had to remain sovereign, right? So he had to get married in secret or up under a different name. He had his family set up somewhere different, and he did his stuff with the mystics and the brotherhood and stuff that went down to Egypt over here. So the story of Jesus, man, is deep. Jesus, you talk about Messiah seeds. And the concept of a Messiah seed goes back to Jesus, because Jesus was one of the true Messiah seeds. He was born up under the signature, the solar signature of a Messiah seed. This is why I remember when they talk about King Herod, I think it was, went looking for Jesus as a baby, and I think I talked about this on the last video I did about Jesus, but they went looking for Jesus as a baby, and he couldn't find him because he was hiding out, because he was the Messiah, the anointed one. They knew he was born up under that star. They knew all the babies, really all the male babies at that time, the firstborn, were born up under that star, and they was doing sacrifices on the firstborn males. You see, because that represented, that's who got the inheritance or the covenant, was the firstborn male. So they had to kill off the firstborn male to keep the world of illusions and the matrix and fuel that. So that's what Jesus was really fighting against. See, it's going into financial stuff too with monies. Jesus was not broke. I didn't mean for this video to be long. I'm about to be done in a minute. It's just a few points. They just come and I just keep talking as the Spirit speaks to me. And we just conversating about the Lord. So you can't get mad on this one. But yeah, so Jesus, man, he walked around, and a lot of the male babies during that time was being sacrificed, and his whole life was a battle against that. This whole same thing that we're going through now, the stuff that you're seeing on television, this is why it's happening now, because he said he would come back. Remember I told you that Jesus is here. Because if you turn on the television, you see the patriot movement, and I don't mean to be talking. I know they saying people that talk about this are terrorists, and you can't even say nothing. That's what I'm saying. That's why, if you're in that law, that's cool with you. But this is not terrorism. This is just my opinions. It's their right to fight for their land. Those people over there, it's their given right. Even in nature, if you try to go run a group of animals off of their habitat, they're gonna fight you for that. But you can't pass a law and say animals can't do that. You can't do that. There's a law saying animals can't. Well, you guys do it. You pass a law saying animals can't do that, so then that gives you the right to murder them. See, that's control based on slavery. That's what Jesus came to go against, to free you from the yoke of slavery, because slavery was written into even the Constitution. This is why they came out the 14th Amendment. We came over here to get away from that. This is why they say that Jesus will come back and rise in the West. This is what the Egyptians taught about Jesus, actually. The second coming will be in the West. That's why it has to happen in the West, because we came here to establish this land to get away from that, and here we are right back up under the iron hand oppression of slavery and murder and living up under your Lord desires and being a victim of sin, which is really sensation. So when you say I'm a sinner, that just means you're a slave to your sensations. You're a slave to your lower self. You're not a magician. You're not a master. I'm not knocking you. I'm not trying to, shame you. I'm just keeping it real. Because you're a sinner. So you're a slave to your sensations. The sensation of ejaculation. The sensation of orgasm. The sensation of getting high. You're a slave to that, to the point where you can't stop it. So Jesus said that he died for your sins. Meaning that he died and shed his body and accepted a new body that was based and predicated upon it couldn't become a slave to sin. See, this is what he did. He transmutated himself. He transfigured himself at the age of 33. And you can do this in meditation. He activated his Merkaba and embraced a new body. See, every 7 years you get a new body, because your cells reproduce themselves like every 7 years.